Well, thank you for making time to join us for another episode of the Trading Bell. We are in a global crisis, and that is the coronavirus. Today on the program, we shall be speaking to the Cabinet Secretary for Industry, Trade and Enterprise, CS Betty Maina. And what you can see right now are some of the locally made masks that are already going to be supplied in Kenya. And of course, the CS will also be talking to us at length about the numerous interventions that the ministry has and what are the future prospects for the country. Thank you so much, Madam Waziri, for hosting us.
Thank you.
I see you've kept the social distance rule. It's a meter.
I hope so. Somebody needs to come with a ruler.
Oh, yes. Let's get into the deeper issues of the day.
Yeah.
The country is currently dealing with this crisis. We've seen pronouncements by the president on how this matter is being handled, the incentives he's given to the country. This touches the common man and of course the investors. From where you sit, how would you assess our response so far as a country compared to our peers in the region?
I think we've done very well with regard to responding to corona. I think the first thing to remember is that coronavirus is a health emergency, and the measures that have been taken, especially around health, have been intended to minimize the number of people who get infected. The measures on social distancing, reduction of work. An introduction of work from home, reduction of spaces for interaction are really intended to ensure that we don't have a great spike in infections as a country, and that is something that is commendable. The other thing that has been done in addition to health is to begin to explore ways of cushioning people against the impact of this disease. And I think what has been done, the tax measures, for instance, increasing the relief for PAYE for low-income earners, reduction of the income tax rate for income earners, the arrangement with the banks to review lending terms and repayment terms for businesses, the expansion of the social safety net in the Inua Jamii program, the increase in the number of health workers. These have all been great initiatives, and I've done a lot to, first of all, sensitize people, but also demonstrate that government is caring and recognizes that this is going to impact on the economy, and this is going to impact on people.
Okay. And Waziri, you've raised very pertinent issues around the reliefs that have been announced. And of course, we'll be discussing them in a deeper sense. But looking at the current state of affairs, the economy is bleeding. When you look at the curfew, we are having right now businesses closing by around 4 p.m. Employers have to shut down by 4 p.m. How will this play out in the long run, in the long term, especially when you look at our economy? We are not yet a 24-hour economy per se, but we have a lot of potential. As government, how would you, of course, further encourage companies and investors that over and above having this curfew, how do we continue sustaining the trade agenda?
I mean, there's no doubt that the economy will be hit. I mean, the global economy has been hit by coronavirus. But I think the one thing to work at is, first of all, to recognize that it has hit different sectors differently. The hospitality sector has clearly been hit once you close restaurants and bars. The tourism sector has been hit once you eliminate flights, because international flights is what brings tourists around. And anyway, in any crisis, people tend to start to roll back on discretionary expenditures. So things that are not life and death, are not expenditures. People tend to save and preserve themselves. So those sectors have been badly hit, and we recognize that. But there are also other sectors. It's been interesting to see growth in other opportunities. For instance, because of the long stay-at-homes and social distancing rules, there are people who have opted to, invest or to have, deliveries instead of going to the supermarket to get different supermarkets to deliver to them instead of going to the market.
Which is quite innovative.
Yeah, it's quite innovative. And luckily, instead of going to the market, I belong to a chama, and people have been talking about, how do I get these goods from the market? And so, no, just give the order, so and so will deliver. And and in that particular instance, the person couldn't deliver in 2 days because they were very, very busy. So they are, they're undertaking shopping for people and delivering at home. So there are people who it has innovated. It has given people space for innovation in business. For those, if bars are closed, the delivery services are delivering drinks to people at home. Of course, usually people might not drink that much at home, so I can imagine that there might be declines in consumption. But it has not been eliminated completely. Looking again, we've been discussing our export sector.
Yes.
Has suffered a lot.
How are the numbers?
Especially the textile sector. In the beginning, when the crisis first hit, we thought that the impact was going to be delays in imports of inputs. But 2 weeks later, the real issue was just the collapse of the demand in Europe and in the US, because with closures of malls, and that's where they sell, where a lot of these garments are sold. Then a lot of the buyers were sitting on huge inventory. So the first order was, do not cut whatever we have. Don't ship what is there, and don't cut anymore, because by the time the economy reopens in the West, perhaps the styles will have changed. And clothes are highly perishable. If you miss a season, that's it.
That's true.
So what has happened, a lot of those textile firms or garment firms are now the ones that are making masks for domestic consumption. So there's an opportunity in every instance. I was speaking as well to some of our vegetable exporters. The flowers have suffered a bit, but it was starting to pick up this past week. But for vegetables, there's been a great demand, especially for processed vegetables, because people now can't go to the supermarket, go to the market frequently. So then they buy canned beans instead of fresh beans. So it's become a greater demand for some of our products.
Yes.
We've had a challenge, for instance, with freight, because the only planes that are allowed to come in are cargo planes. But therein lies an opportunity for something like Kenya Airways to also turn some of its passenger planes into cargo planes so that it can lift. Because there's still a requirement for our products. So I think this disruption is it's not it's not a dooms scenario. Okay. I think for businesses that are willing to be innovative, we have seen a lot of those changes. Even for small businesses, personal care, businesses, salons and stuff. The way people have chosen to cope is by really enhancing their own sanitation sanitization, cleanliness. And you still find, okay, there are not that many people that will be going off to get a haircut all the time, because it might not be a necessity. But for those who are open, they're just having to invest in being responsive to their clients' needs. So yes, it has had some businesses, but it has given opportunity and rise to other productive activities as well.
I like that you bring this up, Madam Waziri, because in the midst of all this crisis, we are clearly seeing there's the spirit to stand up and, of course, be innovative for businesses, and which is very commendable for such organizations, and we do hope it will cause a spiral effect into the economy. And Madam CS, talking to us about the trade impact, how has domestic trade been impacted, especially knowing very well that intra-Africa trade is currently at about 17%. And when you look at our biggest trading partners in the East African region, we have the likes of Tanzania, of course Uganda being a top trade partner. We've shut down the borders. How has this so far impacted on trade within East Africa?
The one thing globally all governments have done is, even when there's been restrictions on movement, they've been very careful to stress that it's restrictions of movement of people. But immediately, whether it's in Kenya, I think almost immediately the measures the measures were announced by the president on the 15th of March. Within that week, we were working together with our East African colleagues on a protocol for movement of cargo, because we realized how dependent our economies are like. I mean, so it's been quite critical, and that's what happened in Europe too. The one thing that they really did was to ensure, even as you had restrictions of movement of people, you maintained openness of cargo. Same thing when we restricted air traffic, it was very clear that it did not refer to cargo. But it is important that these, the people who transport this cargo are able to also observe the health protocols and requirements of the country. So in the case of Kenya, we require that anybody incoming takes, their temperatures are taken at the border, their details are taken, that they stop at designated spaces. And with electronic cargo tracking, it's quite possible to track movement of people. The same thing has been done in Uganda, the same thing has been done in Tanzania and in Uganda. So even as you say, borders are closed to passenger traffic, but they are not closed to cargo. Now, some of the measures may lead to delays. I agree. There have been some delays around interpretation also of the curfew. But as we go along, we resolve these problems, because we are very, very keen to ensure that there is no shortage of goods, because it is difficult to maintain prices if there is a shortage of supply.
Madam CS, help us understand the fact that we've also seen a number of commodities, of course, this being the sanitizers and the face masks. In many outlets, from what you're gathering from Kenyans, is that there's been a shortage. We don't know if it is an artificial shortage or whether it is genuinely a market shortage. But we've seen the government also coming out strongly saying that they will be able to step in, and a number of facilities will be tasked with coming up with these face masks. Just give us a clear picture how this is going to roll out, how will it be distributed to the masses in informal settlements who perhaps might not be able to afford what is being sold in the retail stores.
Okay. First, I think the issue about shortage, I think, has really arisen out of a lot of panic buying by Kenyans, because first, I mean, it wasn't, those were not goods that were in great demand before. You just wash your hands, or sometimes people forgot to wash their hands. You didn't end up, we didn't have mandatory mask wearing. So the masks we've had in the market are masks that are worn by medical personnel. But it has become necessary to maintain the spread of this disease by ensuring, more frequent hand washing, use of sanitizers when you don't have water next to you. But we really need to stress to people that your best protection in this case is really proper hand washing with soap. But if you don't have soap, then sanitizers. Now, if there wasn't that amount of demand for sanitizers, even whoever had produced them the week before the announcement did not have enough in stock. But government has assisted and stepped in. Kenya Pipeline Company stepped in to make these sanitizers and to distribute them free, so that at least there is no excuse of the same. The business community has been very good at supporting these initiatives. When it comes to something like masks, we've often used them for medical personnel, but masks are now demanded of all of us when we are out in public. So of course the pressure is going to be so much. You can't the sector hadn't produced that much. But I'm very excited that in the last 1 week, Kenyan firms have all risen up to produce masks, which some will be distributed free to especially to healthcare workers and to frontline service providers in security. And it's going to be made available through various acts, including people's donating. But what I want to state is that a lot of these masks can be made at home. You don't have to go out and buy a mask. We all learned needlework, at least in my time. We learned needlework in high school, and many of our mothers and fathers can do this. A lot of our tailors, and small and medium enterprises can do this. So it's a great opportunity to be able to do that. What we're doing is that with the Bureau of Standards and the Ministry of Health have given some guidelines with regard to what sort of, if you're making homemade mask, it should be made of cotton, it should be 3-layered, it should fit snugly, above your nose. So, and that's something we can all, many people can do at home. So, even for those of us in poor settlements, if we don't have a benefactor, we expect that we will be able to get masks around. But there's no doubt in my mind that sometimes you can't reach everybody. I think it's important that families spend this time alone at home to also learn to make these masks.
All right. And Madam CS, as we come to the tail end of our discussion, when you look at the global markets, financial markets to be precise, we are seeing a very turbulent time.
Yeah.
And this also spreads over to Africa. And Kenya being one of the most resilient financial markets, how are we positioning ourselves post-COVID-19? The question on the minds of many Kenyans is, will our economy bounce back? Will we be able to get back to where we were? How long will it take us? Those are the hard questions, even in the minds of the business community, who have had to ask their staff work from home. Some have asked to ask their staff take unpaid leave. But for how long? And what is our strategy moving forward?
How long will it take? I'm sure everybody in the world would like to be able to answer that question. And a lot really depends on the health challenge, and on how this disease pans out, and how soon, like we say, flatten the curve. Because once you get transmission to controllable levels, then it's possible to reopen some economic activity. Once you have, are clear about who are the infected people, who are their social networks, whether they're in quarantine or not, then the reason why you have these semi-shutdowns is to minimize transmission in a manner that overwhelms health facilities. Because there may be, you could say, let's get everybody infected, but if they get infected and they are critically ill, you don't have the medical facilities for that, which is why you have these restrictions. So the reopening really depends on the success of these measures. that have been put in place to reduce the spread and minimize the levels of infections, as we say, in a flattening the curve rather than the spikes that we saw. So once we've taken these measures, I think enhanced measures to really restrict movement, even from Nairobi to others, and within the other COVID-infected areas. So I think it behoves us to be able to observe these measures strictly for these 21 days, and then we see the result at that point. And then decisions will obviously be made based on that analysis. They must be based on reason. They must be based on facts. I think the one thing that we are very careful, and the President was very careful in the statement, is to ensure that even if we have this restricted movement, there's movement of food, there's movement of essentials. So you don't run the risk of starving because there's no, if there's a restriction of movement of food. What I expect and what we were hoping, obviously, the people with the relief that comes from the formal economy, with the relief that comes from the banking sector in support of their businesses, people can maintain some modicum of consumption. But I suspect, of course, like all of us, when you're nervous, you just tend to consume on bare essentials. So for those businesses that are in, production or sale of goods that people consider non-essential, there will be a little bit overheat. I mean, I don't know how many people are buying new phones. I don't know how many people are buying new cars at this point in time.
Definitely.
There are some things.
Yeah.
So there's some areas where there's depressed demand. But I think for a lot of people who are around services, essential services, there'll still be vibrant demand.
Fantastic. And CS, I just want to get your parting shots, and I'd like you to look into this camera and just reassure Kenyans, reassure the business community in terms of where we are headed, and is there hope at the end of all this?
I think we must remain hopeful. I think you can't go ahead. You can't wake up each day if you don't have hope. So I think we are very confident that we shall defeat Corona. As we fight it here in the Republic of Kenya, I think the Ministry of Trade and Industry has been at the forefront of supporting businesses, receiving their ideas, helping them navigate the different situations of restricted movement and enhancement of social distance. So for businesses in Kenya that still have queries and challenges, we have a business emergency response center that is open 24 hours and set up at Telposta, and continually receiving the feedback of businesses as they experience these coronavirus days. The other thing that we said, beyond COVID, there is hope, and we look forward to renewal of Kenyan businesses, renewal of Kenyan industries, and new innovations, and striding forward to a new decade, because the world is never going to be the same again. Some business models have been changed, have been challenged by Corona, and if your business model has been challenged, I think we will all offer to work together as we chart out a new course. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Waziri.
Thank you. Asante.
I'm told this is the new way of saying, how are you?
Yes.
Thank
Namaste.
You. Namaste. Well, we've been speaking there to the Industrialization and Trade Cabinet Secretary, that is Betty Maina, just giving us insights into how the government is handling this coronavirus. And she's very optimistic that the business will bounce back and the economy will be back on course. Well, that's where we wrap it up for this week's episode of The Trading Bell. My name is Agina. Let's keep engaging here on KTN News. Have a lovely evening.